Chapter 1. The night is his. A.D. 1176, 12th November.
"Get that monster!"
The call echoed in the distance.
"He murdered a child!"
A second followed. With his left shoulder, the intruder dashed through the brushwood wall of a cottage and left behind the stunned-looking family. It did not take long for them to realize what was going on and to whom the preceding screams were dedicated, and they had already joined the mob. The intruder had clenched his teeth. The words thrown after him didn't hurt nearly as much as the bolt that was still stuck in his right shoulder, its tip gleefully sticking out in front. With his left elbow he thrust the cloak behind him out of the way of the right's grip to draw the short sword. Frontally came an attack of the first of the three militiamen who had stood weapons drawn in his way. The intruder, however, had deftly dodged a step to the side, and before the first attacker knew it, the short sword had sliced his stomach open. He was still falling to his knees when the second attack was blocked, so that the plates were crossed. With a jerk from his upper body, the intruder pushed his opponent backwards, stabbed the third between two ribs in the chest before he could act, and then cut the second's throat. The life was still breathing out of them when he had already taken flight again. He only had to manage to escape to the nearby forest. That night the three moons were covered by a grey-black layer of clouds, and his black equipment would let him blend into the darkness. He knew, however, that this time they would chase him for quite a while. This time he had truly gone too far. The first snowflakes of the year trickled down on the pale skin of a 10-year-old, whose lifeless eyes stared at the sky. None of these nature-created artworks melted on his past body. Some of the surrounding people cried. For others, bewilderment had struck silence in their throats, so that no words came out of their mouths.
"Let's come back."
An elderly man spoke, whose hair was no more than a frizzy grey circular line on his head. A young man at his side at first faltered.
"Did he really?" "Yes."
"Damn shit!" cursed a militiaman in his 30s who had just joined them, striking the ground with the shaft of his lance in such a way that the rings of his chainmail rattled.
"Do you know who that fellow is?"
Silence.
"Carvin? That is the younger brother of Belial, or was much more. Damn it!" "What's the matter with you? Sure, that child is a damn sad sight, but that's not why we should." "This is not any child. Belial's brother's lying here in front of us." "I don't know a man by this name."
"Oh." His eyes grew wide and he nodded auspiciously.
"You will meet him as soon as he learns of this."
"Belial will want our necks for this,"
another of those present now remarked.
"Whoa, hey! That was the Black Wolf who killed him. Threw a dagger right at the boy's throat. I've seen it."
"Me too." The words were met with immediate agreement.
"You see? And who's this Belial anyway?"
The militiaman took a deep breath. The air of the young winter entered his chest chillingly, only to be expelled as white vapor.
"All I know is that he's an influential merchant, something like that. Lots of rumors about him. He's said to have strangled the dragon with his own hands."
"Of that I heard too. If I'm not mistaken, he's been to see the king himself once or twice because of his sore tongue." "What?"
The old man gulped.
"With the king himself, you say?"
Communal nodding.
"Okay, listen up. First of all, we need the Black Wolf, alive, if possible, so that the consecrated blade can judge him in Thorin's name, and that the confession can be choked out of him for us. If that doesn't work out, and I'm looking at you in particular, Ronga, then that. Furthermore, we need a few volunteers to take care of a proper burial for this poor soul here."
The old man pointed to the child with a nod of his head.
"Let's first get the lad out of here with as much dignity as possible. Thorin beware. He can't be left lying in the street like that."
Like an ocean of flames, the wall of torchbearers threw itself in the distance. Oh yes, they chased him, just as he suspected. Not only the militia, but soldiers of the consecrated blade now as well. His wound was bleeding too much, even with the bolt still stuck in it. But that was not the only reason why he had to take care of it. A thin blanket of snow had settled on a damp forest floor, and his own blood betrayed him. What's more, even Thorin himself seemed to be less than gracious to him, for the snowfall was already receding.
"Spitting in my life again, eh?"
He groaned, leaning against a tree so that he would see the nearing night of the flames as little as possible. At least for a moment he wanted to have that out of sight. With his left hand he then reached for the tip of the bolt sticking out of his right shoulder and broke it off. Not a sound escaped him as he pulled the rest out of his wound from behind with as even a jerk as possible. But the look in his eyes screamed with silent agony, and his jawbones already became apparent under the skin. While he opened one of the belt pouches to take out the necessary items to clean and bandage the wound, he could hear their shouts indistinctly. He did not understand the contents, but he could already guess them. A little later he had the wound as clean as he could possibly get it, and along with the applied pressure bandage he tried to flee deeper into the woods. As an exiled, one was either familiar with these regions or dead, whereas they were strangers here, and soon they would regret mistakenly believing that their community would keep them safe from what lurked in the darkness. His fingers clutched the still-drawn short sword tightly, but by now it felt as if he would have to break them to free them from this cold rigidity. If it had to be, he would swing the sword until his last breath. If it had to be. But he wished it didn't have to be, until he suddenly stopped.
What was it again that people think of you?
The thought had been creeping through his mind for a while, but found resonance now. So he stood there, with his back stretched out and his head raised to the sky, as if he was letting a foreign power take possession of him. The wall of flames from the torches was about to split into smaller groups. Then the black wolf took a deep breath. He closed his eyes and felt the warmth creeping into his fingers, along with a distant cry, deep inside him, until there was only this one will: retribution.
The blood trail ends here!
But he's nowhere to be found around here. I'm telling you, it's because this guy's a monster. You probably just bandaged his wound. On the move?
It's the Black Wolf! Already forgotten what else they call that scumbag?
No. It's only hard to believe. Well then pay attention, because...
He listened up, and not just him. A scream not too far away reached them. When they looked in the direction from which it came, they saw the torches that had just lit up the forest there go out. Nervous whispering began to break out among them.
Has this shithead got friends here?
The voice that had previously called out deep into the forest for the challenge was now little more than a whisper.
Something like that has no friends. Are you telling me then that it was him alone who just flattened half a dozen? Don't talk like that about our comrades of the consecrated blade.
Suddenly a blade tip protruded from the man's mouth. The rest stared in shock. The bearer of the sword was a black armored man wearing a mask of the same color that looked like the face of a wolf. Now it was this group whose screams reached out to the others. Hector trembled. That scar! He had seen that scar many times before. This, now a young man, Black Wolf cut through the militiaman like a judgment of Thorin. Each swing of his blade cut down another. It was so fast. Hector could do nothing but stagger backwards with trembling hands. No man, so he thought, should be able to fight like that. Blood splattered like rain on the snow. Finally, gasping, the remaining man also fell to his knees, tried to grab his gaping throat in the last seconds of his life, but then tumbled forward to the ground, where a pool of red quickly formed in the stained white around him. Hector wanted to say something, but his lips quivered, so much that only scraps of letters came from his tongue. He groaned in pain as the child murderer heaped his boot on his chest.
The others will come.
It finally came croaking out of him. His heart skipped a beat as he felt the cold iron of the tip from the blade against his carotid. Warm blood still flowed from it and ran down on his skin. He could no longer hold back the tears. Never had his own life been so dear to him. The Black Wolf had put his index finger to his lips. Then, after a few seconds, he spoke.
When they come, tell them to be quiet. What?
Are you deaf? His voice rose. Then I can cut off your ears, you don't need them anyway.
No!
Good. I hate having to repeat myself, you know? So, don't do that again. Please.
Why? Why are you doing this?
He wailed in pain as the blade cut his cheek. Tell them the Black Wolf is prowling and that the nice people have to sleep at this hour so they can do Thorin's work dutifully tomorrow at the rising sun. The intruder leaned down to him. Just at that moment, one of the three moons peeked over the dark cloud cover, giving off a silver glow that fell upon them. Now he could see the scar over his left eye. Anyone who makes even a little sound after this hour, do you understand? Anyone who does, the Black Wolf will hear them. The night belongs to him, and whoever disturbs it. He made no movement, but it was clear to Hector that in his mind he was just pointing at the dead behind them. He tried to withstand this monster's gaze. You wear the armor of the consecrated blade. At these words Hector listened up. Suddenly he felt reminded of the oath he took, the words he spoke, the virtues he pledged himself to. But before his hand could reach for his dagger, the enemy blade bored into his right arm. He cried out in pain. You hardly wear white with your blue armor. Leather, no wine-red cloak. On your badge on your left shoulder is the dagger. You are a simple soldier of the consecrated blade, freshly joined. It was clear to Hector that this man knew this only made him more dangerous. Still, he wondered, how? Had he once been part of the royal army? But he dared not speak anymore. The glaring pain emanating from his arm, in which the slowly warming steel was still lodged, burned into his mind. Tell your friends in Aston what has happened here. The Black Wolf wants to live in peace. However, if the consecrated blade continues to hunt him... Ah! The sword cut from his flesh. He bites back. No sooner had the boot also been lifted from his chest than the Black Wolf had disappeared into the darkness. In the same minute help rushed to Hector's aid and he was pulled to his feet. Meanwhile, a faint blue announced itself in the distance, letting the grey blackness of the night fade more and more hour by hour. In the tavern to the Nimble Weasel, things still haven't calmed down though. Young Carvin had been laid out in front of the door and carried away. Soon he would be laid to rest, buried in sanctified earth. Even Belial would come and take the message about his brother's death accordingly.
It was terrible,
Hector said before that, however, who was only one of many who were all seated around a large table. He would tell the words the Black Wolf spoke to him. He would report what this monster did. Not to let him be in peace at night, though. Everyone should learn about this spawn of evil who now even murdered children. This man should henceforth have no night left to himself, and no hour of peaceful sleep.